Welcome everyone to High Strangeness in Alaska, the Bigfoot Studies. I wanted to talk about Bigfoot in the mountains at higher elevation. I tried to get off the beaten path. I am on the road system, which is disappointing to me. I feel the best evidence and encounters and studies you can do, investigations, are when you really get out there in Alaska. There's so many places you can get to off the road by taking an airplane or a boat, and I am planning on doing trips like that in the very near future. But I tried to get as far off the beaten path as I could. I'm away from people, looking at tracks, looking at things, but I think my chances are going to be way better once I just get way out there. There's just no doubt about it. You get away from the human presence and you start to see more things. But it's undeniable that there have been tons of Bigfoot encounters at high elevation. In the last 10 years, there's been some really good ones in everywhere from North Carolina to Colorado and Oregon. It makes sense to me. The mountains are very hard to access. I mean, you can see how craggy and jagged these rocks are out here, and it's very hard to travel in the mountains for humans, so it makes sense for a Sasquatch to live out here. There's also caves out here. You can find natural caves, old mines, perfect home for a Sasquatch. Tons of stories about Sasquatch living in caves. So there's all kinds of reasons. What I like to think about is there enough food out here to sustain a large creature like a Sasquatch? And you take a look at bears. I mean, no doubt in my mind that bears live up here too, share this area with Sasquatches, and they are very big creatures and they are able to sustain themselves. You've got the berries as far as the eye can see. Even in the spring, you can dig them out of the snow. Lots of animals to eat, and that just makes me wonder about some of the disappearances, because we get a lot of disappearances every year of hikers out in the mountains. No doubt the land can just swallow you up. It's very dangerous out here. The weather changes, you slip, you fall into a gully. I mean, there's a million ways to die out here, but the Sasquatch, I believe, is a meat eater, and it could be some cases where disappearing people, who knows what's happening. But I tend to think of a classic Sasquatch as living in the tree line. You think about the Northwest coast, the redwoods, giant trees, and that's where you really get a lot of Bigfoot sightings. However, there's the security of climbing to high elevation, getting away from people, other predators, or whatever. And they may have caves up there and then spend time down in the forest. A lot of these video examples are really interesting, where you see something far away, a humanoid walking, and it just seems massive and just traverses a mountainside faster than any human could. They've done some really interesting studies on what the leg stride was of some of those videos. It's pretty impressive. I think Bigfoot would use the mountains to get around to different areas, go back to the tree line. Who knows? Some may just live up here. I think there's more food and more places to hide in a thick forest, personally. But I mean, you've got the Himalayan Yeti. That's no doubt a Bigfoot-like creature that lives up in the crags and in the mountains. But it's definitely, we are hearing a lot of cases of Bigfoot sightings, high elevation, way up in the mountains. There is no doubt they're out here. Very hard to traverse, hard to get at. Just makes a lot of sense to me. So One of my favorite mountain encounter reports was from Colorado's Summit County, and this is known as the Mayflower Gulch incident near Frisco. A hiker was up at 11,000 feet, so he was pretty high, and he saw a large bipedal creature attempting to climb a 20-foot high like snowbank, and he kept falling down. Researchers believed it was like a juvenile Bigfoot just messing around. It finally gave up, but it was really interesting that it was a Class A sighting. People can say that it is a Sasquatch with greater confidence because you had this eyewitness seeing this. So I thought it was a really cool report, especially as the Sasquatch was in the snow and at a very high elevation. So that's not just, in the mountains at the tree line, that's way up there. So really interesting report. Another interesting case is the Squamish Sasquatch, where there was actually video footage of White Rock, British Columbia, while hiking the Tricuni Peak in the mountains near Squamish back in around 2014. This hiker, he estimated his altitude was at 2,000 meters, so he was way up there. And he saw a humanoid figure walking up the side of the mountain in the middle of the nowhere without a backpack or gear. It seemed to be covering the ground very quickly. A lot of researchers believe it was faster than a human could go. People tried to discount it when some hiker admitted that he was doing a solo hike without any gear, and he said that he believed it was him. However, it turned out that he was there on July 2nd, and this sighting and the video footage wasn't for several more weeks after that. So that could not have been the explanation. So to me, that's another good Class A sighting. I'm here with Rob Roy Menzies. Come by the Bigfoot Art Gallery if you are in the Palmer area. It is a meeting place for Bigfoot lovers and people interested in the topic. I'm going to do a series of videos with interviews with Rob Roy. And the first one, I'm just wondering, what do you think about Bigfoot at high elevation? Do you think, have you heard a lot of stories of Bigfoot being up in the mountains at higher elevations?
I've often wondered about that too, because it does seem a little odd that what on earth would even want to live at some of these upper levels, especially in the wintertime.
Right.
I still have a hard time believing that they're up there. Mm-hmm. But I do have one story that was given to me by a National Guard colonel.
Oh, wow.
Years ago, and they were training for a week long. I cannot remember where they were, up north somewhere. They were in the mountains, mm-hmm. and there was a whole unit, and one of them spots something climbing upper elevation, a mountain, and they all had the binoculars and scopes and everything.
Right.
They all claim it was not a man. They said it was walking on two legs. Wow. And the Bigfoot word came out. But this colonel confided that in me when I used to work on Fort Rich.
Right.
And it's a pretty interesting story. So I have heard them being seen at upper elevations like that, but I don't know how they would survive up there.
Classic cases where it was just kind of big strides walking
just
across
walking
the mountainside.
up, and they had to watch it through their binoculars to see mm-hmm. it closer. It was across a valley. It was mm-hmm. kind of across a valley, and they were looking upper at it. It was going up the mountain, but they were pretty high up there themselves, from what I understand. Mm-hmm. So there is that. I've known a few eyewitnesses have seen them like on the mountains up by Hatcher Pass.
Right.
Like up high, walking.
Interesting.
I guess the term the ridge walkers, the natives used to call them ridge walkers.
Interesting.
Because they used to say they walked the ridges, the mountain ridges, because they could see both left and right.
Right.
Pretty much all around. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I look around occasionally, and there is ridges everywhere in this state. There's these mountains. So maybe for viewing purposes, advantage. I think that's a lot of why people don't see these things, is they have an advantage on us.
Right.
They're up. I think they stay up higher than we are.
Spot us first.
Yeah, they can see us first, but I don't know how high they go and how long. That's a big question. And I would only be assuming, at this point, I don't know what like I said, I don't know who would want to go up and live in that high of an elevation,
right?
Especially in the wintertime. But we got mountain goats, we got other animals that live up there, so
yeah,
it may be a food thing. Maybe, like I said, it may be a visual. They can see what's going on around them.
But they're up there, aren't they?
From what I understand, I've heard stories. I've heard some stories. I have not seen any myself, but
right.
I've heard the stories. So we shall see. Hopefully, I'll hear some more. So
awesome. Thank you. I am going to be spending some more time in the mountains, doing some investigations, poking around, looking for tracks, looking for signs, seeing what I can see. So I'm going to keep up the videos. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.